Manamano. Do 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 do. Oh, hello there, and welcome to week 2 of Introduction to Anthropology, a home edition. I just got a new monitor, so hopefully things technically should move a little bit smoother as I show you all the things for the week. Uh, Occasionally, I'll be glancing over here to look at my notes, and I turn on a PowerPoint, and so on and so forth, and then I'll look back. So first, I'd like to briefly walk you through the things that you are supposed to do for the week. And to do that, I'll switch over here. As always, the text of the email that you received from the course web that you've probably clicked on to be watching this video, you'll always be able to find that here under the announcements. I have sent it out early and pinned it so that I could do this, and I could click on it right here, and this is what you received on Sunday afternoon. The links to all of the things that you're supposed to watch or to read are located here in this email, in this announcement. And you'll always be able to find those things down here first. The very first thing that you should probably do this week is go ahead and do the virtual fieldwork assignment on symbolic practices among the Neubla. Last week, the theme was symbolic practices. That's play, art, ritual, myth, religion. You know, if you're not, you might help you to take a look back at the mini lecture for last week. Maybe look at the discussion forum wherein people posted examples of symbolic practices, specifically rituals as they applied to their lives. And then reflect upon the symbolic practices of the community that you participate in and that you're representing in this virtual fieldwork project. Make sure that it's the same culture that you wrote about in the last 2 assignments. And in this assignment, you're supposed to specifically think about examples of play, art, ritual, myth, religion, etc., that are important and distinctive to the culture that you're representing. Be descriptive, share examples, and how are these important for the creation and maintenance of the group's distinctive culture? And then finally, what functions do you might think they serve? If we were doing this as the more fully developed fieldwork project, I would ask you to identify functions in your partner's culture and then ask them what he, she, or other members of the culture think about your interpretation. But we can't do that here. So now I want you to think about the functions that you think these symbolic practices might do in your culture. And then once you've done that, because that's easy, it's thinking about symbolic practices in your life, and you write about them. That's all there is to it. These will form the field notes that you'll use to write your autoethnography at the end of the semester. Don't worry, instructions will be forthcoming. Now, I'd like to move on to the theme of the week, which is power in society. And I put in society in brackets there because, power has a very specific meaning in physics, and what we're talking about is power in society, social power, and that is the ability to influence others' actions, to constrain their choices, and to shape the outcome of interactions within a social network. And I'll explain some of these terms in the next couple slides. Normally I'd be doing this on the chalkboard, which would be a lot more fun, and we'd be able to talk about it. So, you remember what culture is. At this point, you have spoken these things, written about these things, culture enough that it should be uh, like a mantra to you. That culture is beliefs and practices that are learned, shared, patterned, adaptive, and symbolic. Then what is society? It's important to ask this question and to make a distinction between culture and society because we often use these two words interchangeably in everyday English as we speak. But for social scientists, anthropologists, and sociologists, culture and society actually refer to different things. Culture is the primary subject matter of anthropology, specifically cultural anthropology, and it's the beliefs and practices that are learned, shared, patterned, adaptive, and symbolic. Society, on the other hand, is really the primary topic of sociology. And at a small college like Albion College, we're in the same department because these things are very closely related. But society, most properly, is the overlapping and interconnecting networks of people and their interactions. Right? So culture is the beliefs and practices of people that are learned and shared among a community, and society is the people and their connections. And the reason that that's important distinction to make as we move on to a discussion of power in society is that networks of people can be organized differently. Some networks can be very hierarchically organized, where some people, some individuals within that network, have the power to influence the actions of others, to constrain their choices, and to shape the outcomes of social interactions. Other networks are more heterarchically organized. They're more decentralized. Influence and power are shifting and unstable. There's no formal hierarchical organization. So, in returning to that definition, power in society is the ability of some individuals to influence the actions of others, to constrain the choices of other people, and to shape the outcomes of interactions within a network of people who are interacting. The thing is, it's not, we shouldn't think about this just as the power as just the ability of some people to influence other people. Rather, we should perhaps look at it from our own perspective, because all of us are enmeshed in networks of power wherein other people get to influence our actions as well. Sometimes this can be very direct, as in when the teacher, the policeman, or our parents tell us what we should do. And in other cases, it's less direct. Our actions are shaped by forces that we can hardly see or understand. And that's a big deal. There's a lot going on there, and I think it helps us to analyze the operation of power in society, in different societies, that's what anthropologists do, by looking at the scales at which power may operate. So at the smallest scale, power can operate at an interpersonal level between actual individuals. Right? Parents have influence over the actions of children, at least they hope they do. You can imagine all sorts of other situations where one individual is able to influence the actions of another individual. At a higher level, larger scale, is power that operates because individuals are members of an organization. So if you think about our relationship, my relationship to you, it's not so much about the relationship of Brad Chase to you as an individual. It's rather about the power that I exercise over you, which I do in the form of grades and influencing your actions, is the result of our roles in the organization of Albion College. I have the role of professor, you have the role of students, and it is widely understood and accepted that we all show up at a certain place at a certain time, and that I tell you to do things and you do them, and you earn grades for doing so. And it's not so much about the individuals involved, me and you. And then at an even higher level, and will be the topic of an entire mini lecture in about 2 weeks, comes structural power. And this is wherein some individuals have more influence in power in society because of history and culture and forces outside of the control of individuals. By the virtue of my having been born in the United States and the place of the United States in the global economy, I have more power and choice and ability to influence the world than someone who is born in a country with a very small economy in a marginal part of the globe. And that's not my fault, but it is still true. So those are some scales at which power can operate. And power comes from different sources. So power can, operating in any of those three scales, can come through the control of resources. And this is what we might call economic power. Most obviously at the interpersonal scale, someone can pay someone else to do something for them. And it's through the control of resources in our society, that's money, that you can influence people to do things because they need that money, and you control the flow of that money. At a higher scale, at an organizational scale of operation, employees and management in a company. Right? Employees don't show up on time because they are fearful that their boss will hit them, but they are afraid that their boss will turn off the flow of resources to them. That is, they will stop getting a paycheck. Right? And we all are subject to this kind of power throughout our lives. I mean, I love teaching anthropology. I hope you know that. I am very disappointed that we have to do this virtually because I enjoy talking to you about these things and trying to engage in conversation in a classroom. But, sometimes there might be places that I'd rather be at 10:30 on a Tuesday and Thursday morning. Right? But I need a paycheck because I got a mortgage and I'm enmeshed in all these economic relationships, and I got to do my job in order to get paid. And that's not because I'm afraid that Mark Roy, our provost, is going to, stop handing me cash. But rather it's because I have a contract and certain duties that I need to fulfill in order to keep getting a paycheck. And then at an even higher level, those of us who are born in the United States simply have more resources and more money to do with as we see fit than someone who's born in, I'm going to pick a country that is very low on the socioeconomic scale in the world, a country like Namibia, perhaps, where that does not have a lot of resources or a lot of cash, a lot of foreign exchange. They have less power in the world. Individuals born in that society have less power in the world. Moving on to political power. Political power is power that comes through authority and oftentimes ultimately the use of force. So when we think about politics in the United States, we often think about Democrats and Republicans and elections and representational democracy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But in a broader sense, when anthropologists talk about politics, they're talking about the operation of authority in society. Who has it and how did they get it? And how do they maintain and exercise that authority? So in the context of a state-type society in the 21st century, it is our government that has a monopoly over the legitimate use of force. This is a classic definition of the state from a sociologist named Max Weber, and it holds up remarkably well, that agents of the government under certain circumstances, which are very clearly spelled out, may use force to up to and including the taking of people's lives. And it is okay, it is correct, it is lawful for them to do that because they have authority. How did they get that authority? That's where, in the United States, the democratic process comes in, wherein we vote for our local representatives, we vote for president, the electoral college, yada, 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 the separation of powers between the judicial, executive, and legislative branches, and so on and so forth. In other times and other places, the operation of power, of political power, is very different. Think about, classic case of kingship, say in Old Kingdom Egypt, where there was a pharaoh who was using his authority, his monopolization of the legitimate use of force to command huge workforces to build pyramids. No one elected the pharaoh, but yet they still have that power and authority. And then finally, ideological power is the power that's derived through the control of ideas. The heads of religious organizations and movements in the world, for example, have tremendous power over believers, not because they control an army, nor do they necessarily control resources, but through the power of their ideas can influence the actions of people, constrain their choices, and shape the outcomes of social interactions. Wow. So we got power operative at interpersonal, organizational, and structural scales, and we have the sources of power deriving from control of resources, the use of authority and the use of force, and the control of powerful ideas. That's a powerful matrix. So one way to think about the power in society is to look at the sources. These are the x-axis here, and the scales at which power is operative in the, that's the X and this is the Y, but you know what I'm talking about. And you can think about a situation, any situation that might come up in a culture that you represent in the fieldwork project or in any of the films or readings that we're about to talk a bit about, and think about, well, what's the source of power and what's the scale at which it operates? And you might find that in any given situation, power might fall into a couple of these different boxes, but nevertheless, this is a way to systematically think through things. Each of these boxes is not mutually exclusive. The Catholic Church, for example, is ideologically powerful because of its control of ideas that are held sacred by millions and billions, perhaps, of people around the world. Not sure I'm the Catholic Church. But the Catholic Church in the United States is also the largest landowner. Did you know that? They own so much land. Local parishes that are then controlled by dioceses and so on and so forth, all the way up the hierarchical chain to the Vatican. So the Vatican not only has ideological power, but also has economic power. The same thing for politicians. Money and authority go hand in hand. But nevertheless, this is a powerful matrix for thinking about how power operates in different societies. And in the films and readings for this week and discussion forums, I want you to specifically think about power in this way. And it'll be great. Super duper duper. And we're back. At this point, I'm going to talk through some of the things. Here. So there's the fieldwork assignment, wherein you're supposed to think about symbolic practices, which was the theme of last week, having read and watched and written and thought about symbolic practice. Now I think you're well prepared to reflect upon the role that symbolic practices play in the culture that you represent. Here's the mini lecture for this week. Wait a minute, I'm recording the mini lecture. How can that be there? Oh no, yes, oh no he didn't. Oh yes he did. This video here is fantastic. It's called Onka's Big Mocha. It's one of the best ethnographic films made in the last 50 years. And, I could go on and on talking about how great it is, but rather you should just watch it. Um, this link here is to a copy that I ripped off a DVD and I'm streaming from my Google Drive. So you'll have to be logged on to your Albion Google account to watch it. Because it is so famous and pretty much everybody who's ever been in an introduction to anthropology class has probably seen this. There's, of course, a YouTube version out there, but it's pretty crappy. As somebody in the comments said, if there's any fewer pixels, it would be radio. So if at all you can, and you have the bandwidth, I would prefer that you watched it this way. And Onka is, it's a story of a man living in Papua New Guinea who's attempting to build power, to build influence and control over members of his community. And this film is about his attempts over the course of years and months to build power for himself. He's definitely of a society wherein self-aggrandizement is important, and so in the course of time that anthropologists were living and doing participant observation among his community, he also recorded an autobiography to the anthropologist. And if I'm led to, to believe the prologue to the book, Onka, A Self-Account by a New Guinean Big Man, it was kind of an ultimatum. It's like to the anthropologists, well, sure, you can make this film, but you also have to record my autobiography and publish it. Right? He wanted his story out there. So that's one of the two readings for the week, which is actually the first chapter, the introductory chapter to Onka's autobiography, and then also the chapter 13, which is specifically about the mocha that he is working to do in the film. And I'm being intentionally vague about what a mocha is because I want you to watch it and I want you to figure it out. The next reading is we return to the Kalahari Desert among the Kong or Wasi people that we've visited quite a bit. You remember they were hunting and gathering people in the 1950s, and anthropologists were terribly curious to learn what life was like in a society without kings, chiefs, laws, and representational democracy. Is it just chaos? How was power structured? These were some of the most important research questions that anthropologists had in the 1960s when they were hanging out with them, doing participant observation. And this reading here is also a very famous reading that almost anyone who's been in an introduction to anthropology class has read. And it really highlights the difference between the Wasi people's society and the way that power is organized in their society as compared to the way that power is organized in Onka's society. So again, I'm not gonna spoil the things for you because I really want you to read them. I want you to watch the film, read Onka's autobiography, and then read Eating Christmas in the Kalahari by way of contrast. The discussion forum, I put up 6 questions here. This is where you can go, you answer one of these questions, then you can see what other people have posted. It will help you write better assignment answers, and you will earn sweet, sweet points while doing it. You'll remember that I'm using these discussion forums as a way to account for participation in the second half of the class, for which you need 25 points. If you write a really great answer that's going to help other people understand what's going on, you'll get 5 points for your answer. You do that 5 times in the second half of the semester. You got all the participation points, and if you do more, I'm just going to count them as extra credit. This is where you can just build up the points if this is how you roll. if you're comfortable and excited about doing online discussion. Maybe there'd even be a discussion where people are talking to one another as if this were like a real social network and not a hierarchically organized class management system. As I think about hierarchical and heterarchical organized networks, this is very much a hierarchically organized network. But now I'm kind of digressing, and I don't have the editing capability of taking this all out, so I'm just going to move right on. And I really hope that you participate in these forums, because it will definitely allow you to write better answers in the assignment. The assignment that I have cheekily called Power and Pigs. And I see that I had put a link to this video, the YouTube version of the Onka's Big Mocha video in this, in case you want to use that and find it there. The questions are pretty straightforward. If you've listened to this mini lecture thus far, you'll be able to answer question 1. What is power? Where does it come from? What are some scales at which it operates? Here's a question about the Jukwasi people and eating Christmas. So, gosh, if I were going to write this up for a graded assignment, I would want to do a trial run by posting some discussion in the discussion forum and seeing what other people have to say before I did this. The next 3 questions are all about, the next 2 questions are about the film Onka's Big Mocha, and the 5th question, I want you to specifically go into the autobiography and find why Onka himself says that his mocha is so important. The narrator of the film and you might have some ideas about why he is working to pull off this big mocha. But because we have his autobiography, we can see what he actually says. And here's where I want you to try to think about these differences, which is what would have happened in the fieldwork project, wherein you identify and interpret a function of some symbolic practice, and then you ask people about it. And most of the time people say, yeah, that's an interesting observation, but that's not why we're doing the things. And so this is a way to experience that. Sometimes outsiders from an etic perspective can identify functions of symbolic practices in the way that power operates in society that is startling and jarring for people who are participants in a culture and from their emic perspective. So that's what I want you to think about in that 5th question there. And as always, if you have any questions, problems, or confusions, please ask them here first. In this way, I'll receive an email about it as soon as you post here. I can fix the problem, and everybody else can see the answer to the question simultaneously. If it happens in the middle of the night and I haven't responded yet, maybe somebody else will, and we can crowdsource an answer to a problem. And finally, 10:30, Tuesday, Thursday morning, if you'd like to talk about any of this stuff, you can always visit me at my virtual